Hi, today we are going to review the Nikon D5500. This is the latest D5000 series camera from Nikon, and this is the second D5000 series camera that we have been testing. We tested the Nikon D5300 a year and a half ago. Now, what this camera brings to the market is the first touchscreen on a Nikon DSLR camera. So, as you can see, you can very easily touch and the camera takes a picture, or you can rotate between images very simply using the touchscreen. So let's start by taking a look at the camera and its general functionality. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the features of the Nikon D5500. First of all, the sensor is still 24 megapixel sensor, just like the D5300. The processor is still Speed 4, again, just like the D5300. The battery stays the same. It's the same battery that we had on the previous model, but the battery life has improved, so this is nice. Now, in terms of Wi-Fi, Nikon preserved the Wi-Fi just like we had on the previous model, but it eliminated the GPS. On the D5300, we had both Wi-Fi and GPS. Here we have Wi-Fi and NFC instead of the GPS. So they decided that the battery is probably consuming simply too much power from the camera, so they removed it from the body. So this is what we have on this camera. Now, it's still just one memory card slot camera, so this is what we have here on the side, unlike the D7000 series, which has two, and of course higher models as well. Here we have an HDMI slot, and on the other side we have both USB, microphone, and shutter release. And here you can see the Wi-Fi logo. Now, Nikon did change some of the bottom layout of the camera. If we look at the back, we're going to see the biggest change that Nikon implemented on this camera, and that is the touchscreen. We have a 3.2 high-resolution touchscreen. So, for example, let's take a look at some images, and you can scroll between them very quickly, very easily using your hand, and you can do pinch to zoom very easily. So basically just like your smartphone. This is very comfortable, very nice. Now, one thing that you can do with this touchscreen, which Nikon implemented, and it's also nice, is the ability to use it to focus and change the focusing point. So you can use the viewfinder and get your face close to the camera, and then use this upper part of the touchscreen, this portion of the screen, to basically move between focus points. This is really nice, although in our testing we discovered that it's not always very accurate, and sometimes it moves to a place that you didn't want it to move. So Nikon still needs to work on this a bit, maybe in a future firmware update or in a future version of this camera, but they still need, this feature still needs some work. But it's a nice feature, and obviously Nikon isn't the first to implement it, but it's nice to see this on a DSLR. So this is nice. Now, in terms of the screen itself, very nice, very bright. Actually, we sometimes prefer tilt screen over variable angle degree screens like this, which opens to the side. It's a matter of personal taste. There are probably people who prefer this over something because you can shoot selfies aiming this towards yourself, and this has more control. But if you just want to shoot downwards, for example, upwards, it's quicker to open a tilt screen if we're able to just move it upwards or downwards when we are holding the camera. The D5500 is a very comfortable camera to hold. Nikon implemented a front grip which is deeper than what we had previously, so this is a very nice addition. Now, Nikon did change some of the layout of the bottoms that we had, and talking about the bottoms, they are actually very small. If you have very small hands, maybe it's comfortable, but to be honest, even with our relatively small hands, these bottoms specifically, and some of the others, are too small. And if you have large hands, this camera is definitely not for you. So we should really advise people to get to the store, hold it in their hand, and see if this is comfortable for them in terms of the bottom layout and using the bottoms. So this is one thing. Now there are a few other things that relates to the bottoms and a few decisions by Nikon that we didn't really like. Now first of all, Nikon doesn't allow on this level of camera to set the OK button to magnify to 100%. So for example, if you're looking at an image and let's say that you look at a specific image, let's turn it like this, and let's say that we take this image, for example, and on other Nikon cameras, specifically on higher end models like the D7100 and 200, if you press the OK button, you can set it to go to 100%, and so you can check basically if your image is in focus, in full focus. Here you would be able to do this only by going like this, pinch and zoom. And another thing that Nikon didn't implement is the ability to tap twice to go to 100%, which is something that every smartphone does. We're not sure why this is something that is missing on this camera. So this is one thing. Another thing that we found missing is the fact that you don't have 1080p 30p shooting on this camera. You have 60p, you don't have 30p, at least not on our camera. Maybe it's a region thing. We have a European camera, I'm not sure, but this is something that is missing and we would like to see it. Otherwise, in terms of video, this camera is very capable, although you don't have, like you do have on the D7000 series, the ability to choose whether you're in video mode or in stills mode in live view. So on the D7000 series, you have two options, or a switch which turns between two options, either live view for stills or live view for video, and you can set your preference in terms of settings on both of them. Here you basically have one setting and you can change the settings each time you go. You can either use the live view for stills and take a still picture, or press this button and record a video, and then you have the same settings, so you need to change them. Not very comfortable, to be honest. This is something that we would like Nikon to change. So this is in terms of the live view. Another thing which is missing, and this is something that is missing from the entire line of DX cameras from Nikon, is the ability to change the aperture during live view and video recording. This is missing from the D7000 series as well, and it's a very big miss in our view. We talked to Nikon a few times about that, and they tried to explain to us that this is some sort of technical problem, but they do have it on the D750 and the D810, so we're not sure why the DX line doesn't get this. Maybe they just decided that this is not a feature worth implementing on this level of camera, but we do miss it. So this is in terms of the aperture mode control over live view and video mode. So from here on, let's take a look at some of the performance of this camera. As we mentioned in the written review on LensVid, we didn't have the camera for a long enough time to really test the battery, but from our time with it, it seems to perform very well and was more than good enough for a full day of use. Unless of course you are going to shoot lots of long videos or use the touchscreen all the time. In this case, just get a spare battery. In terms of performance, the focusing speed seems to be pretty quick, as you can see. Basically on par with the Nikon D5300, which we have tested. Moving on to sensitivity, here on the left we have the image from the Nikon D5500, and on the right we have the image from the D7100. Now if we look at the size of the file, we see that the image from the Nikon D5500 is 12.6 megabytes, while the image from the D7100 is only 8 megabytes. And you can actually see the difference in the detail on both images. If you look here on the left, you see so much more detail on this teddy bear than we see on this side. Just look at the fur. You have a lot more detail, and if you look here, you can see the fabric, the white fabric, while here you basically don't see anything. We have seen the same results with the Nikon D7200 when you compare it recently to the Nikon D7100. It's the same thing. Basically, Nikon was able to improve the sharpness and the detail level of its most recent cameras compared to the old D7100, which is now a few years old. So you can see this in a lot of the fabrics and the threads in this image. Again, just look at this compared to this. Huge difference. This is ISO 100, so you don't have a lot of noise if you look at this part of the image. But if we move on to ISO, this was 100, let's move on to 800, and you will start seeing quite a bit of noise on the D7100 here on the right. As you can see, there is noise starting to accumulate here. On the D5500, you don't have a lot of noise at this level. So this is pretty huge difference. Again, just watch the difference in terms of the details again when you move 2 stops up to ISO 800. Now let's move to ISO 1600. This is usually as far as we would go with the D7100. In this case, in terms of the lighting and the picture itself, you can see a lot of noise with the D7100. This is again the reason why we don't go beyond that. In this case, maybe even this ISO is a bit too high. And on the D5500, you do see some noise, I would say, but not too much. This is acceptable. So you can work with this. On this level with the D7100, it's I would say a bit too much, at least to our taste. Now let's move to 3200. We're using the fast tone comparison feature, the software, to compare both images. And if you look at the sensitivity, if you look at the noise level on the right on the D7100, it's really high in this image. So this is ISO 3200. Here I would say that the difference is at least 1 stop, maybe 1 stop and a half, not sure, but there is a huge difference. And again, you still see some details on the leg, while here, well, not too much, and a lot of noise again. Just see what you can see, in terms of details here and on here. You can see that this camera is a bit old with all these red dots everywhere. So this was 3200. Let's go to 6400. This is completely unusable, I would say, on the Nikon D7100. On the D5500, well, maybe still usable. It's hard to say. You can see a lot of noise here. It really depends on, again, the lighting and the image itself, but the D7100 is completely unusable on this in this lighting conditions. Finally, if you really want to see how it looks on 12,800, let's compare both of them. I would say that both cameras are not usable at this level. The D7100 is above its basic rate of ISO. This is extended. And on the D5500, although it's still within the regular, not extended rate of the sensitivity, this is very noisy, I would say. So this is in terms of sensitivity on both cameras. I would say that the difference is, again, as we said, about 1 to 1.5 stops at least. Really depending on the lighting conditions. You can use the D5500 at least up to 1600 ISO, maybe 3200 depending on the lighting situation. And from here on, let's move to the conclusion and see what we think in general about this camera. So we want to conclude this review of the Nikon D5500. This is definitely an incremental upgrade versus the previous generation, the D5300 that we have tested about a year and a half ago. We like the improved grip. It's a deeper grip and more comfortable to hold. The better battery life is also a nice addition, but the biggest change is the touchscreen, as we have shown you. It's a very useful addition. Just like a smartphone, you can scroll between images and also autofocus using the touchscreen. Both nice features, but not everything is perfect. First and foremost, I would say that the touchscreen, at least when you use it to choose the focusing point when you're using the viewfinder, which is a nice concept that Nikon implemented here. It's not the first company that has this feature. It's not perfect all the time. It's nice, but it's not perfect. So this is one thing. We also would like to see some other improvements coming from the D7000 series, like the use of the OK button to magnify the image to 100%. There are a few other things that you can read on our full review of this camera on LensVid. But I would say that if you already have the Nikon D5300, there is not a lot of point upgrading to this version. If you're just starting, if you're a new photographer and you want to, basically I would say a very good entry-level, advanced entry-level DSLR, this is a very good camera. There are also a few other cameras on this category, like the A6000 from Sony, and there is coming basically an A6100 or an improved model from Sony in the very near future, which we are going to look at. But presently, this is one of the best in the category. You can read the full review, as we have said, on lensvid.com, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube.